I'm Jack Aldrich. It's a real pleasure to be one of the invited speakers at IES's Day of Giving. The title of my talk is The Future of Study Abroad. I'm also going to talk about the future of travel. And my background is I'm now a professional futurist, but I'm also a former IES student. I had the opportunity to study at Durham University in 1985 and 1986 for the entire year. And one of the best experiences I had was I was able to join a dozen other students from all across the United Kingdom and spent a week in January studying at NATO headquarters in Brussels. And it really influenced the future direction of my career. After I graduated, I became a naval intelligence officer. And then when I got out, I went to graduate school for strategic planning, ended up working in the Pentagon as a strategic planner. And during my tenure there, I had the opportunity to live and work in Brussels at NATO headquarters for an entire year. I mentioned this because before I get into the heart of my presentation, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least talk about the war in Ukraine. And from my perspective as a futurist, one of the really big shifts over the last 30 years since I worked at NATO headquarters was the future battlefield. To a certain extent, of course, it will always be geography, but the future battlefield is really the human mind. And Russia and other of our adversaries are using misinformation and disinformation to try and win the war. And I don't really know the solution to this problem, but part of the solution is we need to see our common humanity. And one of the best ways to do that is to live and study abroad and begin to see one another as real humans. Again, I don't mean to say that that will solve the world's problems, but studying abroad can make the world a better place. But here's what's really on my mind. Just a few weeks ago, I came across a study, and it was conducted over in the UK, but I think this stands for US students and students around the world. They polled thousands of them, and 75% of all young people between the ages of 16 and 25 are frightened of the future. And look, I get it. Climate change, the war in Ukraine, racism, sexism, authoritarianism, biodiversity loss, mental illness, opioid, suicide. There are a world of problems. But as we think about the future, the one thing I tell everyone is we can't be afraid of the future. And one of the first things I think we can really start doing is get into our discomfort zone and confront our own fears. And I think that's one of the beauties of studying abroad. It's not easy. It is difficult, but it forces us to overcome some of our fears. And once we do, what we see is that there is a world of opportunity out there. But now let me walk you through 5 trends that I see from my perspective as a futurist. The first one is we're really seeing an exchange of ideas from all around the world. And this issue was brought home to me when I was in Peru a few years ago. The picture I'm showing here are the Aymara people, and they're an indigenous people, and they live up in the Andes in Bolivia, Peru, and Chile. But when you and I think about the future, we tend to say, oh, the future's out in front of us. The past is behind us. The Aymara have a different perspective. They say that the past is in front of them and the future is behind them. Isn't that weird? I thought, what are they talking about? That's not right. But here's their perspective. What they can see is the past. So from their perspective, the future or the past is in front of them. What they can't see is the future, therefore it's behind them. There's no right or wrong way to see or think about the future, but there is a different way. And to me, this sort of brings home the beauty of studying abroad. We begin to see different perspectives, but we're going to need to see multiple perspectives in this future. Let me just give you a couple of other examples. This is the Laos Plateau in China. And the Laos Plateau is a massive area. It's about the size of France. But over the last 30 years, they have regreened it. And so as we think about the future of climate change, can we learn from the Chinese? Absolutely. We need more students studying what they have done over there. And can we apply it to our own arid areas in the United States? Or could we apply it to the Sinai Peninsula? The answer is yes, but first we have to exchange ideas. And that's one of the beauties of studying abroad. Another trend I see as a futurist is something known as frugal innovation, that there is an incredible amount of innovation going on in Africa, in India, in Indonesia. Why? Because they don't have the same infrastructure. And because they don't have the same infrastructure, they're figuring out how to use new technologies in some incredibly innovative ways, which we in the West could actually benefit. So I think we're actually going to see more business students begin traveling to places like Africa and India and Indonesia. Why? To exchange ideas and get new perspectives. One of my favorite examples is Kate Raworth. She's an economist at Oxford University. A few years ago, she wrote a wonderful book called Donut Economics. And she is a refreshingly candid economist. And she challenges one of the key assumptions of all economists, and that is economic growth is good. But Raworth makes the point, nothing in nature grows forever. In fact, unlimited growth is the ideology of a cancer cell. As we think about the future of business, we have to somehow figure out how to live within the constraints of this planet. But if you're not familiar with Kay Raworth or other thinkers, other economic thinkers, you're not going to have these new ideas that I think that we desperately need in this new world. But just to understand Raworth's influence, Amsterdam and now even Philadelphia and Portland are trying to introduce donut economics to their city council members and to their citizens. I recently had the opportunity to go to Iceland last year, and Iceland and Spain and the United Arab Emirates are now going to a 4-day work week. And what they've all discovered is productivity has not gone down. Is there an exchange of ideas that some of us could learn by going to Iceland and Spain and the United Arab Emirates? Of course there is. But one of my favorite examples is this. It's from St. Gallen, Switzerland. And they're fundamentally rethinking the aging process. And they are now exchanging time for future care. People who are in their 50s and 60s can care for people in long-term care facilities and then bank their time so that when they get older, someone will then be caring for them. It's a fundamentally different way of thinking about elder care. But my whole point is the exchange of ideas is absolutely necessary, and studying abroad is a huge component of that. And so the beauty of international travel is it just helps us reimagine what we can do here at home. The second trend I see is hyper-connectedness. And let me give you this little analogy for why the world's getting so hyper-connected. 12 years ago, then President Obama commissioned a group of preeminent scientists, rocket scientists, the CEO of Lockheed Martin, and said, what is it going to take to get us back to the moon and ultimately to Mars? And this blue ribbon commission of very bright people said, it's going to take 12 years and $36 billion. Well, you know what? They were wrong. Elon Musk did it in 6 years, so 50% faster than the experts thought, and he did it for $1 billion, 1/136th of the cost. So why do I tell you this? Well, because Elon Musk also figured out how to land those rockets back down on Earth. And so what we're doing is we're now putting satellites onto those rockets, and those satellites are blanketing the entire globe. And this is going to be a game changer. Of today's 7.5 billion people on the planet, 3 billion still don't have access to the internet, but that's going to change in the next couple of years. And as that happens, we're going to get hyper connected, but those satellites are also going to connect us to new technologies, 5G technology. It's going to connect us to augmented reality and virtual reality. And there are going to be advances in artificial intelligence that allow us to translate foreign voices so that we can communicate with people. So suddenly travel is going to be a lot safer. It's going to be easier, and we're going to be able to communicate more. Now, I'm not suggesting that this is going to get rid of the need to learn foreign languages. There's still a great need for that. But with these new devices, we're going to be able to travel to different places, and language isn't going to be the same barrier or the same sense of friction that it was in the past. But we're also going to see other advances in virtual reality. Just last month in April, South Dakota State University created a meta university. They're replicating their university in virtual reality. Why do I tell you this? Well, I think other universities from around the world are going to do this. This is not going to reduce students' desire to travel abroad. What it's going to do is make them feel more comfortable traveling abroad. Why? Because they're going to do it in virtual reality first and then say, I want to go do the real thing. But it's also going to allow us to communicate with people in fundamentally different ways. We're going to get more connected. The third trend that I see in both studying abroad and the future of travel is that regional and remote travel is going to get a lot easier, a lot more affordable, and a lot more sustainable. Let me try and put this in some perspective for you. One of the really big trends that's going to transform the world, and it gets overlooked by a lot of people, is battery technology. And for the last 10 years, it's been getting better, faster, and more affordable. But you know what? It's not going to slow down. So we're already seeing electric vehicles take off. But you know what else we're going to see? And we've already started to see in it. Battery technology has allowed for an explosion of micro mobility. Maybe you've seen the Lime scooters popping up in your city. Maybe some of you already own an e-bike. In my case, I went out to Glacier with some of my college friends last year, and but for electric bikes, I wouldn't have been able to handle some of those mountains out there. So now my wife and I are already thinking about a bike trip in France or Switzerland. Why? Because my legs aren't going to be burning. The lactic acid isn't going to ruin the trip. I'm actually going to be able to bike and enjoy the scenery at the same time. But my point is, with battery technology, this is just the start of micromobility. We're going to start seeing other transportation devices that are going to change how and where we can travel. And let me just give you two examples. United Airlines recently purchased 100 electric airplanes. And these are clean, they're affordable, and they're going to change regional travel behavior. Suddenly, you're going to be able to get from London to very small towns throughout the United Kingdom. You're going to be able to go to different smaller places in Europe. Why? Because these planes might only be 4 or 6 seaters. There might not be a lot of people wanting to go up to, say, the Lake District, for example. But now, with electric planes, we're going to be able to get to new places differently. But one of the most exciting things is this. And you can now purchase this technology for $92,000. So it's not cheap, but it's being developed over in Switzerland, and it's called Jetson. And as you might expect, it's essentially a flying car. So as we have devices like this, e-planes and electric personal transportation devices, we're going to be able to go to different places cleanly and affordably. The fourth trend that I see in both studying abroad and travel is a greater exposure to nature. The Japanese have a wonderful term called Shinrin-yoku, and what it means is forest bathing. And I really see it as a trend where people are trying to get out of the urban areas and expose themselves more to nature. Another trend along these lines are dark sky zones, zones where light pollution is really low, but you can immerse yourself in the beauty, the wonder, and the awe of the universe. I live in Minnesota, and recently the Boundary Waters, which is a beautiful national park up along the border of Canada, was designated a dark sky zone. But I tell you this because, I mean, one of the benefits in today's hyper-connected world where everything is accelerating, more and more people are craving exposure to nature. But this exposure to nature is going to go deeper. And let me just give you a couple of examples of why study abroad is so important. I recently came across the news that down in New Zealand, because of the Maori indigenous people, the federal government in New Zealand has recognized a river, the Wanganui River, as a legal entity. And to a lot of people, that might sound crazy, but from my perspective as a futurist, it's not crazy at all. What's crazy, slightly crazy, is in the United States and throughout the developed world, corporations, the Exxons, the 3Ms of the world, are recognized as legal persons, but our rivers and our lakes and our mountains are not. But I think we're going to see a lot more of this. But again, if you could travel to New Zealand, you're going to get a different perspective. You're going to be able to think about things differently. In a suburb of Costa Rica, they recently granted citizenship to trees, plants, birds, and bees. And why is that? It's because they're all pollinators, and 40% of Costa Rica's food comes from pollinators. And so if they want to feed themselves, they say we have to take better care of these. But to me, I just see it as the beauty of international travel is we can learn from nature and we can expose ourselves to nature. And I think you're going to see a lot different travel and study abroad destinations in the not too distant future. The fifth trend is international travel is just going to help us see and imagine the world from a different perspective. I recently came across two words that I really like. This is a Swedish word called legume, and what it means is not too little, not too much, just right. Japanese have a similar word called shaisuku, which means just appreciating you that you have enough. And again, I think one of the things that we learn from studying abroad is there are different ways to live. Maybe we don't need as much stuff as we think we do. And we're already seeing these trends sort of creep into Western culture. And from my perspective, that's a wonderful thing, and it can't happen soon enough or fast enough. This is another word I really like. It's a Japanese word. It's called kokoro. And what it is, it's the merger of mind, heart, and soul. In the West, we think of all three of those things as separate entities. But in Japan, they say, no, 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 no. They're all one. And I love that ability to see the world and see ourselves from a different perspective. Another way to see the world differently, I like this example from Iran. Persian rug weavers purposely, right at the beginning, when they're weaving a rug, they put a mistake in it. And the reason they do that is once they do that, they're no longer fixated on making it perfect. And so they weave faster. But because they weave faster, they actually make more rugs. And because they make more rugs, they actually get better and they get a little closer to perfection. So because they're not worried or focused on perfection, they get closer to perfection. I just love that different perspective. And to me, it's what international travel is all about. When I was studying abroad, I spent a lot of time at the Louvre and other museums throughout Europe. One of the things I learned was really to spend at least an hour with pieces of art that you really like. Some of you might know this. This is Caravaggio's The Fortune Teller. And you might look at it and go, oh, that's a cool or painting, or you might not, doesn't matter. But if you spend some time with it, what the fortune teller is doing is she's not telling the rich person's fortune. What she's doing is stealing his ring. You just see things differently from if you spend time both with art and if you spend time studying abroad. Another example I really like, this is William Blake's painting Newton. And obviously Newton was a great man and he's portrayed as a great giant. But what Blake didn't like about Newton was that he was so focused on only those things that you can measure. That, like, if you couldn't measure it, it wasn't real. But what Blake says in this painting is, no, there's this whole other beautiful world of love and heart and compassion and soul. And just because we can't measure something doesn't mean it's not real. And I share these things with you because I think if we can spend time abroad, we just see the world more clearly and more wholly. But the final example is this. This is actually a piece of Aboriginal art, but I only have it up here as a sort of a placeholder. I came across this story that the Aboriginals, they don't hang their art on walls like we do in the West. What they do is they set art on the ground, and then they invite the entire community to sit around it in a circle and to ask everyone what is their perspective of that painting. And I think it's just a beautiful way to see the world, and it speaks to the beauty of international travel. You begin seeing the world from multiple perspectives, and you understand that the way you see it is not the only way to see it. And so at the end, what does international travel do, and why I'm so optimistic? It's because it changes our world view, and we begin seeing things differently. And so now let me just conclude. Today is IES's Day of Giving. I benefited as a student from a scholarship. Maybe some of you are former IES students or alumni. Maybe you're the parents. Maybe you're just an interested person. But I'm asking you to generously contribute to IES. Why? Because it's going to help our students see the world from a different perspective. And at this point in our world, we need more of that. So thank you very much. And I hope to meet you and all of you in person someday. Thanks.